Good evening. I'm Gordon Chang, a senior fellow at the London Center, and welcome to the American Liberty Award dinner. We are here tonight in this historic club to celebrate our values, not just liberty, but also democracy, human rights, and all that we hold dear. But today, our way of life is under attack. Many people say that this is a time of peace, but around the world there is unease, and in some places there is war. In fact, this is a time of peril, perhaps more dangerous than at any moment in the last 5 decades, going all the way back to the Cuban Missile Crisis. Why is it so dangerous? Well, it's not just because that ISIS, fueled by barbarism, is on the march in Syria and Iraq. And it's not just because Israel stands alone, attacked by militants of all stripes, while Washington adopts a policy that favors kidnappers and killers. It's not just because China is on an expansionist path, taking territory from neighbors in an arc from India in the south to South Korea in the north. And it's not just because Russia, by force, is redrawing the map of Europe, once thought to be a continent of peace. The world is dangerous because America is unwilling to confront aggression. Whether we're unwilling to confront aggression in Georgia in 2008, in Scarborough Shoal in 2012, and Ukraine today. Today, we have lost most of the important lessons of the 20th century. At this moment, some of the worst trends of 1914 and 1939 Europe and 1937 Asia have gone. They are evident. We can see them. We not only face non-state actors like Hamas and Hezbollah, but also we're seeing a new axis centered around Russia and China, with its proxies, North Korea and Iran, and they are all supporting the worst elements in the world today. There will always be ambitious men and women in this world, but it is the free states pursuing misguided policies that are permitting them to become truly dangerous. We seek to engage those who threaten us, and we fear antagonizing those who wish us harm. It is in this context that freedom and democracy need heroes, and tonight we honor 6 of them. These 6, in their own ways, put thought into action, which is the motto of the London Center. There is hope that we can live in a better world because there are Americans who see more clearly, who inspire us, and who lead us. It is our privilege to support them, which is what we are doing here tonight. The London Center, established just 2 years ago, is becoming an essential resource in the fight for freedom. So far, the center has, among other things, sponsored 2 books, The Sunni Vanguard and The BDS War Against Israel. And the center has been working on House Resolution 622, which opposes assistance to the unity government of Fatah and Hamas. Tonight we will hear from the author, the commentator, the educator, the scholar, the friend, the hero of our times, the founder and the president of the London Center. But before that, I have the honor of introducing Sergeant Jesse James Duff, USMC, who has served multiple tours of duty around the world and is a senior military advisor for Concerned Veterans for America. She will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Sergeant Duff.
Please rise and join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to its republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
I now call to the podium Ellie Gold for the invocation.
I feel slightly awkward presenting an invocation at a dinner themed on American heroes, because the impeccable authority of Stephen Vincent Benet in his nonfiction essay, The Devil and Daniel Webster, many men who are intimates of Old Scratch can be convinced that they are authentic American heroes, and the devil's presence at our dinner invocations is unwanted. However, Benet was onto something. America is a grand experiment that all experience, knowingly or unwittingly, contribute to and guide. The fantastic tapestry that is America reaches from the well-meaning, often brilliant heroes to the glittering, often wheel-welding villains. We are all integrally enmeshed in this divinely ordained or perhaps sanctioned exceptionality. The essence of the reality of Benet's metaphor is that it is the genius of America's heroes, Daniel Webster in his example, to transform and elevate their fellows to a consciousness of their place in a greater and therefore holier whole. Under a hero's tutelage, even Edward Teach can be taught. May God find favor in our ambition to emulate and perhaps surpass these luminaries. Amen.
I have now been given the unenviable task of trying to craft an introduction for somebody who needs no introduction. So, to keep the proceedings rolling along, I will just say, Herb London, please come to the podium.
Thank you. Thank you. My friend Eugene Grant made it perfectly clear that we've got to be brief. And I will recall that the great lies of our time are your check is in the mail. I love you as much tomorrow as I do tonight. I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. I did not have sex with that woman. And if you like your medical plan, you can keep it. And of course, you're at the London Center and we'll be brief. I will attempt to be brief. This is a 2-year anniversary. A lot has been accomplished in those 2 years, due in no small part to the extraordinary people that I am privileged to work with. Tony Schaefer and Pete O'Brien have done a remarkable job of coming up with a strategy when the President of the United States said, "I do not have a strategy yet." Well, we had one. All he has to do is read our website. We did put a resolution on the House floor, 622, due in no small part to Ellie Gold's work. And that resolution calls for the defunding of the Palestinian Authority. Our book, The BDS's War Against Israel, is circulating in universities today, countering so many of the arguments that have been made, false arguments, fraudulent arguments that have been made about the state of Israel. And I do owe a lot of credit to my colleague, Jed Babin, who is here today and largely responsible for the book. There's a lot more to say, but as Gene pointed out, I'm going to try and be as brief as possible. I have an assigned topic tonight, and that is heroes. We have, in our time, many people who are called heroes, but very few who are actually heroes. And that's because we no longer have a distinction between fame and infamy. People who are famous really should be infamous. That is not a distinction that is made by people in the media. I'll tell you about a couple of heroes of mine. There's a little Jewish man who went to the Naval Academy at a time when there was great anti-Semitism at the United States Naval Academy. He was a difficult character, and difficult in part because he faced anti-Semitism most of his life. When he graduated from the Naval Academy, his page in the yearbook was perforated. Only time in the history of the United States Naval Academy when that happened. So you could tear the page out very easily if you wanted to. This man, however, rose to the rank of admiral, changed the Navy dramatically, challenged every president to introduce a nuclear force in our Navy. His name, Hyman Rickover. Hyman Rickover one of my heroes who is responsible for the leg of the nuclear triad that is so invulnerable. Another young man I want to talk about I met several years ago, Bobby Knight, the coach of the Indiana University basketball team at that time, introduced him to me. And the reason why he's a hero of mine is not because he was a starting player. He didn't make All-American, but he made the Indiana basketball team playing with a prosthetic device. The only basketball player in Division I history who played with a prosthetic device. Now, he didn't start. He wasn't the star of the team, but he made the team, not out of pity, but out of ability. And the third person I want to talk about, or 3 and 4 people I want to talk about, are here this evening. One was the son of a milkman in Williamsburg, before Williamsburg was gentrified. He could barely speak English because that was not the first language at home. He went from Boys High to Columbia. He went from Columbia to Cambridge. He went from Cambridge to Commentary Magazine, where he became the cultural weather vane for the entire country. I'm referring to Norman Podhoretz, who was last year's honoree. And let me refer to his mate, the remarkable, truly remarkable Midge Decter, who came here from St. Paul, Minnesota to study at the Jewish Theological Seminary and rose to the heights of one of the great voices during the Cold War when we were engaged in an ideological battle that Chief fought so bravely and courageously. There are other heroes in our time. You don't read about them. One of them is the soldiers in the IDF, in the Israeli Defense Force. They are engaged in a civilizational battle. They're the front line in the battle that we are now confronting. It is not merely ISIS, it's radical Islam. It's the Islamic fascists that we are fighting. The Israelis are doing a lot of fighting with 18-year-olds so that our 18-year-olds can go to college. We should never lose sight of the fact that we have an ally in the Middle East who is fighting for the values and the principles that we in Western civilization adhere to. And let me honor another group of heroes. The U.S. Special Forces that operate below the radar, putting their lives on the line to promote our national interests. They are very often ignored. And let me talk about some of the professors that I've known in the academy, and there aren't too many who fall into this category, who are there anonymously, by and large, but challenge the prevailing orthodoxy on campus every single day. There are those who recognize the challenge of our age, the conflict between liberty and slavery. I'm reminded of the book of Exodus. In the book of Exodus, God says to Moses, Moses, don't go through the Philistine territory because it will lead to war. Moses says to God, but that's the shortest way to the promised land. God said it's too dangerous. These people just came out of slavery. You don't want to force them into slavery again. The reason why I tell that story is that we have a choice. The choice is freedom or slavery. And we do not have the luxury of avoiding the Philistines. They're in our midst. We've got to confront them. We have to fight them. We have to defeat them. We have to destroy them. And that is the great challenge of our age. We cannot simply walk around the Philistine territory. Do we have the willingness to fight? Do we have a pride in our history? Do we have faith in the resilience of Americans? And do we believe that we can prevail? I think we can. I believe that one of the great mistakes that the commentators of our time make is to underestimate the resilience of Americans. I believe in this country, I believe in Americans, and I believe in the end we will prevail. Thank you very much. One thing I should always do at a dinner of this kind and neglected to do. Let me introduce the Secretary of Homeland Security in my home, my wife, Vicki London. Let me also introduce a bevy of beautiful women, my daughters, Jacqueline, Nancy, and Stacy London. Thank you for being here this evening. I'm sorry.
Actually, I think Vicki should come up here and talk as well. Anyway, Tony Schaefer, where are you? Come up.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here. We're honoring a dear friend of mine, Catehrine Herridge. Catehrine Herridge is receiving our first ever award for journalism excellence. Now, a bad thing happened a few years ago, 9/11/12. Details were murky. And there's a saying which goes with the situation. Yogi Berra once said, if you don't know where you're going, you may not get there. And that's the truth of what happened that night. And what's interesting is that Catehrine was able to put together the pieces very rapidly. The day after Susan Rice went on TV to lie to the American people about a video being the issue for the attack, Catehrine ran a story the next day saying, it wasn't the video. And it took about 3 weeks for that to get confirmed, and from that single report, everything else regarding Benghazi has sprung forth, to include now the select committee which is about to be held to finally get to the bottom of this. You would think that Catehrine should have got the Pulitzer Prize for this. I reviewed the 2013 Pulitzer Prize awardees, and every one of them went to the New York Times, except for one. Explanatory reporting went to the staff of the Inside Climate News. Hard-hitting news. So, Catehrine wrote a book, The Next Wave, which is the book all about the next generation of radicalism. It is something you ought to pick up if you haven't already. She wrote it 5 years ago that foresaw what's going on now. So, with that said, without further ado, Catehrine is here. She's going to receive the award. She has to get going because her kids are waiting on her at home in Washington. She's a single mom right now. Her husband's in the area of operations, I'll just leave it at that, working hard to defend the country. So, Catehrine, please come up and receive the award.
Wow, thank you. I'd like to thank Dr. London and the London Center for this award. You know, it's tremendous to accept this award really on behalf of Fox News and the journalists there, but also thank you for recognizing my contribution. It's terrific to be recognized, but to those of you who spoke to me before tonight's event and thanked me, that's the biggest thanks of all for supporting our work. About 15% of the Benghazi story is left. It will be the hardest 15%, and it will be the 15% where there is the most resistance, because it's in that 15% that it will go to the principal players. And I hope I can expect your support as I get to the end of that 15%. I get asked sometimes why I do this work, especially by our kids who are very young. Just an aside, when Osama bin Laden was killed, I was taking the kids to school very early that morning, and I was really in my pajamas still with a windbreaker on, because that's how it was in those days afterwards. And our oldest son, who was 5 at the time, said to me, "Mom, how did we kill Osama bin Laden?" And I thought, oh God, this is like a moment that's going to come to define my parenting skills. And I looked in the rearview mirror, and I looked into his eyes, and I said, "Honey, it was a classic double tap. First to the chest to immobilize him, then to the head to finish him off." And his eyes just went, I thought, well, that's... But then he asked me the most important question of all. He said, "Why did we kill Osama bin Laden?" And I said, "Honey, some people are just evil. And he's killed thousands of his own people and nearly 3,000 Americans on 9/11. So tonight, I want to also accept this award on behalf of my husband, who's serving, and our 2 children who serve in their own way as well. So thank you very much.
When Herb and I sat down several months ago to discuss the dinner with the theme of heroes, the decision was unanimous that this year's Legislative Hero Award would be presented to Congressman Joe Wilson from the 2nd District of South Carolina. Now, I'm sure many of you might have the question of why not honor somebody from your own district, sort of like the third longest member of the House, but I think we passed over that one very quickly. But seriously, Joe Wilson, who served his country in the South Carolina Army National Guard, is a person who is not afraid to say it like it is, and who is not shy about working to push for an agenda of peace through strength, even in a time when his own party would rather hide in isolation of our borders, and even though it may mean sending 4 of his sons into combat. When thinking about what I would say as I present this award to describe the liberal agenda that Joe Wilson fights every day, it occurred to me that I can look to the timeless words of Ronald Reagan's famous Time for Choosing speech, in which he says, "Those who would trade our freedom for the soup kitchen of the welfare state have told us that they have a utopian solution for peace without victory. They call their policy accommodation. And they say if we'll only avoid any direct confrontation with our enemy, he'll forget his evil ways and learn to love us, and all who oppose them are indicted as warmongers." And this is the most important part. We cannot buy our security, our freedom from the threat of the bomb by committing an immorality so great as by saying to millions of human beings now enslaved behind the Islamic curtain, give up your dreams for freedom because to save our own skins, we're willing to make a deal and with your slave masters. And he continues, Alexander Hamilton said, "A nation which can prefer disgrace to danger is prepared for a master and deserves one." Now let's set the record straight. There's no argument over a choice between peace and war, but there's only one guaranteed way you can have peace, and you can have that in the next second: surrender. It is Joe Wilson who is in Washington to make sure that it is not we who surrender. Newt Gingrich has taught me that you cannot give a speech without handouts, and Herb London, who has taught me you cannot give a speech without a story. And I'll use one of Herb's stories. For those of you who have been to the Union League Club, you undoubtedly have seen on the 3rd floor dining room the famous painting of the Drummer Boy by Eastman Johnson. During that battle of Antietam, a drummer boy was wounded, upon which he said to his captain, "You put me on your shoulders and I will drum the Union Army to victory," and that he did. Today, many members of Congress beat the drum, thinking that that is what it's going to take to win the battle. What they fail to realize is they win the battle because they're on the backs of Congressman Joe Wilson. With that, Congressman.
Ladies and gentlemen, fellow conservatives, this is just so humbling to be here. I appreciate the very warm comments by Ellie. It's always so exciting. Last week I was running around Capitol Hill and ran into Ellie, and I had some constituents. I said, "Hey, everyone, I want you to meet a real dignitary, Ellie Gold," and they had a wonderful time, and he was so kind to them and so thoughtful. And then Herb London, a living legend of a person who makes a difference on behalf of limited government expanded freedom. Also, at my height, I appreciate he is a tower of strength. And so it's just so inspiring, truly, Herb. Thank you for what you've mean to our country, to our world, and to be here with members of the Parliament from Belgium. I'm honored to be with the talk radio hosts. We just did a program in Tokyo. So it's just very humbling. But over and over again, it's such a reminder to me that good people can make a difference, will make a difference on behalf of limited government expanded freedom. And here we are. It's so inspiring to me, chilling too, in the aftermath of 9/11. We have, sadly, many people in Washington who have totally forgotten 9/11. It didn't happen. And so they just can't conceive a global war on terrorism. But I do feel that way, and so any way that I can work to alert the American people to the dangers, and has it ever been more obvious in the last week? And it just breaks your heart to think of persons who value death more than we value life. That's the creed of Hamas. And how can we possibly forget that in Tehran, the signs they carry in English are very, very clear. Death to Israel, death to America. And the thought that we would even try, and my head explodes, to try to reach out to Tehran to work to fight the common enemy of ISIL. Should it surprise you that Tehran said no thanks? It just is inconceivable. But the bottom line is there are good people here who can and will make a difference. There are so many people here who, as Gordon was referencing the Cuban Missile Crisis, I remember that. I was a little guy. I remember in my hometown of Charleston, South Carolina, the Nautilus submarines and Polaris submarines leaving for potential World War III. And the good news is that we prevailed. Now there's freedom and democracy, and I give credit to so many people in this room. There are more countries now that are exercising freedom and democracy than in the history of the world. Utterly inconceivable. And I'm talking as the chairman of the Bulgaria caucus. I've worked very closely with Slovakia. I work very closely with the ambassador from Poland. Over and over again, I see progress being made. And then my service, too, has been enhanced, and I want to give credit to my wife, Roxanne. She has raised 4 remarkable sons. Our oldest son served for a year in Iraq. So it's very personal, my service. Okay, my oldest son served for a year in Iraq, field artillery, came back and did what every dad wants. He married the newscaster of the largest television station in South Carolina from, hey, you'll appreciate this, Fairfield, New Jersey. Jennifer Miskowitz. I'm known as Jennifer Miskowitz's father-in-law. That's good, because then he was elected the youngest Attorney General of the United States. And then our second son's a doctor in the Navy. He served in Iraq with the Rangers and the SEALs. He's an orthopedic surgeon. Number 3 son served in Bright Star in Egypt. He's a signal officer. And our youngest little guy, 27 years old, just returned from a year as an engineer in Afghanistan. So when I talk about and I did 31 years, and I have to tell the whole story. I spent 25 summers at Fort Stewart, Georgia. I didn't get very far. But hey, but again, thank you for this honor. I look forward to having it, and I want to extend an invitation. If you're ever in Washington, please visit with your member of Congress, but then know that you will have a warm welcome at 2229 Rayburn House Office Building. If you just mention London, and we'll even know it's not a capital of another country. It's Herb. So, hey, but please come by, and we'd love for you to come by. And it's energizing when people come by the office and get a picture behind the desk. It's just so humbling. God bless you. Thank you.
We're going to have dinner in 1 second, but just let me make one remark, going off schedule. Several years ago, the President of the United States, during his State of the Union address, was interrupted when someone said, "You're a liar." Congressman Wilson went home that night, had a scurry from Washington back to Charleston, and his wife said to him, "Joe, you're not going to believe this. There was actually a congressman who shouted out during the President's State of the Union address, 'You're a liar.'" He sheepishly looked at her and he said, "You're not going to believe this, but I'm the one." Well, you're to be honored, Joe, in many respects. Thank you very much. Dinner is served. I have a very distinct honor of introducing two attorneys general who, by comparison, represent the great minds in America, very different from the attorney general we presently have. I'm going to ask both of these gentlemen to join me, but you can read their biographies in the journal that's been sent to you. But let me tell you a couple of things about Ed Meese first. Most of you will not know this, but when Ed Meese was 10 years old, he organized a newsletter for residents of his community in California. He took the money that he raised with his brothers and bought war bonds in World War II. Even at 10 years old, Ed Meese was an American patriot. Several years later, just a few, in 1984, when Ronald Reagan was elected for a second time, the president put together something called the Committee for the Next Agenda and included some very prominent people: Marty Anderson, Pete DuPont, Norm Ture, and a variety of others. I happen to be included in the group, but hardly one of the prominent ones. But Ed Meese was the voice we all listened to, the wise man who was part of this group, the man you can always count on, solid in stature, solid in his understanding of what this country is all about. He was a great attorney general, but more significantly, a great man. The second attorney general I want to refer to is my friend Michael Mukasey. If you've read the pages of the Wall Street Journal, you know that Michael Mukasey is one of the most thoughtful analysts in this country. Brave, courageous, insightful. His story, too, is also on the pages of your journal. But let me make one point about this young man. When Michael Mukasey was raised in the Bronx, he got on a subway every single day to go to his Ramaz High School in Manhattan. He's a true New Yorker. Not like the New Yorkers we presently have, but a true New Yorker. One who I think represents the best of this community and the best of have served in the office of Attorney General. So it is a real honor and a privilege to give the American Liberty Award to two of my favorite attorneys general, two of the finest this country has ever produced, Ed Meese, Michael Mukasey. Please join me. Ed, why don't you say a few words? And Mike, please follow.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Herb, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You know, it's nice to be with a crowd who really knows what an Attorney General is all about. No, I didn't mean it quite that way, but one of my early experiences, I had just been appointed Attorney General, and my brother was the business manager of a school. And so I was visiting him, and he said, would you say something to some of the classes? And so I went up to this first class, and the teacher says, today we have an Attorney General with us. Do any of you know what the Attorney General does? One little fellow put up his hand, and he said, oh yeah, he's the man who puts those notices on the cigarette packs that smoking is dangerous to your health. Well, seriously though, I appreciate very much, as I know Mike does, this honor. I appreciate it because it's coming from the London Center, from Herb, and from the people that work with him, and from all of you who support it, because that's what we need in this country today, is citizens who are willing to stand up for what's right and what's true and what's in the best interests of our country. Dr. Chang at the beginning talked about the situation we're in today. And I would certainly agree with him. From the standpoint of a lawyer, I think we're in tremendous trouble when we have enemies such as those that face us around the world attacking us from the outside and too many people attacking us, particularly in terms of our Constitution on the inside. They are seeking to take away from us our political freedom. There are actually people now conspiring, if you will, in Washington, D.C., in our Congress, who want to amend the Constitution to limit our political freedom and our ability to exercise our persuasion of our fellow citizens as to the issues that we think are important. Today we have attacks on religious freedom, and people are being punished by government itself in some places for merely acting upon their religious beliefs. We have a tremendous problem of economic freedom as the government increasingly intrudes upon our businesses, large and small. It may not have escaped you, I hope not, because it's important that people recognize that just within the last few years, within the last 6 or 7 years, in the index of economic freedom, the United States fell from its usual place among the top 3 to between 12th and 17th, depending on which index you look at. It means that we have attacks today on our freedom. And the only way in which we can defend against those attacks is to ourselves remind people that we have the greatest Constitution in the world, and that Constitution there is to protect our liberty. And the only way we can do it is if citizens take it upon themselves in organizations like the London Center or in organizations that many of you belong to and support, in order to have the resilience to take our country back and make it the kind of a country that the founders started in the 1770s and which we need today. Ronald Reagan always used to say, and it was my privilege to work for him for 30 years, he used to always say, America's best days are yet ahead. I believe that will be true if people like those of you gathered here tonight continue to support Herb London and organizations such as his. Thank you.
I want to thank Herb London for those kind, in fact, those lavish words. To be recognized by an institution that bears Herb London's name and that contributes what this institute does to the nations and to the world's dialogue is really honor enough for anyone. But to be recognized in the company of the others who are being recognized this evening, that really turbocharges it. I think one thing that all the people who are called to this podium this evening, including Herb, have in common is that they stand for what we need more than anything else in these times, and that is clarity. Clarity of vision, clarity of thought, clarity of speech. You haven't heard any one of these people, and I don't think you're going to hear any one of them, tell you or anyone else that ISIS is not an Islamic organization. Or that we are not involved, whether we like it or not, in a war. Nor will anyone, I hope, pretend that this is simply about ISIS. It isn't. At stake in that war is the survival of Western values over much of the globe. Recent history, by which I mean the history from the end of the Second World War until today, has seen Western values by and large expanding, and human freedom and prosperity expanding along with them. But there's absolutely nothing inevitable about the continuation of that trend. Our president has said that the savages who cut off the heads of 2 Americans and a Briton are on the wrong side of history. Well, you know what, folks, at this point, I don't know that they are. And you know what? Neither does the president. I think they're on the wrong side of civilization, and I'll bet everyone else in this room does. But whether they're on the wrong side of history or not remains to be seen. What the United States is better positioned to do than any other country in the world, and therefore what our president is better positioned to do than any other person in the world, is to take action that will put those people on the wrong side of history. But saying it isn't going to make it happen. That's going to take action by people who do what Tony Schaefer, who's here tonight, used to do. And that action is not going to be forthcoming until we have leaders who are willing to speak in plain English about what action is necessary and then to bring it about. And that action can't be confined to ISIS. What ISIS has done is simply to take the vision that was articulated in the 1920s and afterward by two men, Hassan al-Banna and Sayyid Qutb, the founders of the Muslim Brotherhood, and that is the vision of a worldwide Muslim caliphate, a vision that was put on the list of things to do by Osama bin Laden. ISIS has taken that vision and applied what might be described as a brilliant marketing strategy that tells would-be adherents, this isn't simply on the list of things to do someday, it's here today. The effort that has to be undertaken to make sure that that vision does not come to pass is what we're about. Now, it's the job of the Muslim world, not the Western world, to get rid of the underlying vision itself. But until the Muslim world does that, simply saying that those who hold that vision, are on the wrong side of history is nothing but empty words. It's going to take action and a lot of effort to make those words reality. The way that we can contribute to that effort is to support the kind of clarity of thought and vision and word that the London Institute promotes, because only that kind of clarity will produce that kind of action. I thank you very much for putting me in the company of the people you're honoring tonight.
One of the things that a host of an event like this is obliged to do is introduce so many of the warriors in this room. And unfortunately, I would have to go to every single table and point to a lot of people, but I would be very remiss if I didn't mention a few. My friend John Katsimatidis, who has a radio program on Sundays, former candidate for mayor and maybe a candidate again. The one and only Janine Pirro, Judge Janine. God, if there's a forceful voice, a real warrior, it is Janine. And of course, Betsy McCoy, former Lieutenant Governor of the state, Ambassador Bruce Gelb, and I'm sure there are many that I'm overlooking. Please excuse me. But thank you all for being here this evening. And now, I have a very special honor. Introduce two friends, one at a time. The first is someone that I've known for years, and I've admired for years. If you want to learn something about Marshallian economics, this is the man to talk to. If you want to find out something about free market theory, a la Milton Friedman, here was the fellow who organized Milton Friedman's own portfolio. When I had the opportunity of spending some time with the former Prime Minister of Japan, I was thinking very hard about a gift. I couldn't come up with the appropriate gift. It couldn't be something chintzy, nor could it be something too elaborate. I ran into this fine gentleman, Chuck Brunie, and he said, I have the perfect gift for you. What was that gift? It was a painting, a bucolic scene. There were mountaintops in the front, mountaintops in the foreground, and I looked at this painting and said, Chuck, it's very interesting, but I think the Prime Minister has probably seen 1,000 paintings of this kind in his lifetime. He said, no, Herb, you don't understand. Read the back of the painting. The painting was commissioned by Milton Friedman. The mountaintops in the background represented money supply from 1970 to 2000. The mountaintops in the foreground represented the inflation rate. The little house with the roiling waters was the Bank of Japan. And I gave that to the Prime Minister. He didn't understand it all, but there was no question it allowed for an introduction. And when I met my dear friend, Leo Rostin, the former raconteur and wonderful, wonderful friend, I once said to Leo, you've met many people in your lifetime, from the President of the United States to the King of England. He said, let me tell you something, Herb, I've met a lot of people, but the sweetest man I've ever known, the sweetest man you will ever know, is Chuck Brunie. And indeed, that's correct. Chuck also not only is the sweetest man, but he introduced the real methodology for success on Wall Street. And that is, think Yiddish, dress British. Chuck Brunie.
Well, I thought I was going to be honored tonight, but I don't really believe in honoring me. This is the time to honor the London Center. It represents everything. I mean, my whole life, I have been a supporter of free markets, limited government, strong defense, and a close friendship with Israel. And so I'm a big supporter of Herb. And it's been my good fortune to have known him for a number of decades. Excuse me. And to rely on his wisdom and scholarship, particularly on foreign policy, which is a very tough area for me. And also his close relationship with Israel and Netanyahu. In closing, let me say that I'm flabbergasted and shocked and disgusted at this resurgence of anti-Semitism that is sweeping the country and the world. Michael Gubin in the New York Post this past Sunday said there have been 85 incidents of anti-Semitism in New York this year, up 35% from a year ago. Incidentally, there are only 15 anti-Muslim incidents. I don't understand why so many luminaries, take Madonna for one, strong proponent of the Palestinians. I just cannot comprehend it. Anyway, by my count, Hamas has broken 8 ceasefire agreements in the last few months, while Israel has broken none. Senator Ted Cruz expressed my innate feelings and beliefs when he held an audience last week before Middle Eastern Christians. And he said, quote, "Those who hate Israel hate America." And if you will not stand with Israel now, then I will not stand with you. And he stomped off the stage. I want to offer congratulations to Herb for all he has done over the years in all those books and all those articles. And when it comes, I'm looking forward to insights in foreign policy issues, and especially on the importance of Israel. One last point, if anybody wants to get up to date on Israel in a new refreshing book, George Gilder has one out called The Israel Test, maybe 6-9 months ago. And in it, one little thing he said that if you adjust for the population, Israel has 6 times as many Nobel laureates as the number 2 country. So we have to know we're not paying attention to. Okay. Thank you very much.
Chuck, thank you very much. Let me introduce the last of our honorees, a truly remarkable man. I was invited to his club to give a speech to some of his friends and colleagues. When we went to the parking lot said to Mr. Grant, Gene Grant, "Gene, you're not playing tennis today. First time in years." Gene Grant said, "Well, that's because I'm with my friend Herb London, and he's going to be giving a speech." Gene Grant is 96 years old. Now, not only is Gene 96 years old, he's 96 years young, because there are very few people as astute, as clear-minded, as intelligent, as remarkable as Gene Grant. Talk about warriors. This man is a genuine warrior for all the right things. I'm reminded of a story I've mentioned many people before, but I'll repeat it nonetheless. The Emperor of Japan was seeking a samurai warrior. And our friends, by the way, from Japan who are here today are from the samurais. Mr. Masuda is a samurai. Well, the Emperor was looking for a samurai warrior. And he had a Chinese man, a Japanese man, and a Jewish man by the name of Gene Grant. And he said, "Here's the test. Take out your sword." First, the Chinese man takes out a sword, and a fly is up in the air, and the Chinese man sweeps across the sky, knocks the fly down, cuts him in half. Very impressive, says the Emperor. The Japanese man is up next. Japanese man has the same experience. A fly is set free. He takes out his sword, he swings his sword, and he cuts the fly in quarters. Very, very impressive. And then Gene Grant is up. Gene Grant swings his sword at the fly. Nothing happens. Fly continues to go in a direction. Swings again. The Emperor says, "I'm perplexed. You haven't hit the fly." Gene looks at him and says, "Circumcision does not involve murder." Here's a real warrior. A real warrior. One of the distinguished members of the real estate community in New York. One of the truly great Americans. And someone who flew P-51s in World War II. Moreover, he can still wear his same aviator's uniform today. It is a great pleasure and a great honor to introduce my friend, Gene Grant.
I'm going to pull something from Will Rogers' book. I do not deserve this honor, but I have arthritis, and I don't deserve that either. But that's as far as this evening's proceedings will be funny, because we're in a big hole and we do not realize it. We've had war, actions of war, hostile actions of war, and vivid, horrific scenes of human butchery, and it is not acceptable to us. The people who perpetrated these murders would be nice to say that they're animals. I think animal is too good a description of their particular conduct. And here we are in the United States, perhaps perhaps the disunited states, because there are still people in our country who think that Jesus still walks on water. And the truth is far from that. What we have is a party-driven, political party driven by rivalry, bitterness, desire to destroy the opposition that is historic in the history of our country. Never have I been, and I've been around a long time, have I been a witness in one way or the other to the kind of vilification and insult to the opposition party, whatever it may be, as I have during my recent lifetime. This is a sign that our party system, our political party system, may need some servicing, some readjustment. So what would we do? Here we are, having it thrown in our face that the West is a pack of weaklings, has no leadership, has no content to its foreign policy, and has leadership that is far beneath its history. So what do we do? If we do not do anything immediately, and I mean tonight, bombing to smithereens whatever identifiable Muslim encampments, and not only ISIL, but any Muslims who get in your way, strangely enough, must turn us into autocratic animals in a way. I know that what I'm suggesting briefly is I do not wish a repeat of Vietnam. At the same time, we, at this moment, have some superiority, but if we do not act quickly enough, think of what can happen not in the ensuing years, but in the ensuing days and weeks. Our friends, the Muslim SIL and their cohorts, and privately I tell you, there is no moderate Muslim on earth. In writing, they are most intellectually honest. They're telling you, A, that you are a third-class person, if we call you a person. You are an infidel beneath dignity. If you wish to live in our graces, you have to pay us taxes, and to realize that any apostate who drifts away from Muslim beliefs must be killed. Did you ever hear of a religion in writing using the word kill as an expression of love? That is what has sickened me in recent weeks. Imagine if they had enough time to create their own air force with the help of people yet to be identified or guessed at. What about access to the nuclear bomb through alliances they may or may not have already begun to achieve? As I say, I am afraid of another Vietnam. But all the while we busy ourselves with the concerns that I just described, Iran goes on its merry way to trying to complete its enrichment of uranium, the lead component of a nuclear bomb, which they and or their allies, ISIL, could easily get access to once the technical work is finished, and we have no real way of stopping them. So, what are our steps now? If this sounds like a warlike speech, believe it, it is. I recommend, believe it or not, something that we Americans would shudder at, but I'm a witness to the destruction of the cities of Essen and Dresden. Those two cities were, in one case, repositories of the world's archaeological treasures. And the other, it was a big manufacturing center. They were destroyed by carpet bombing by hundreds of B-17s and B-24s out of desperation. In my opinion, that is what led to the surrender and to the retreat by Hitler to his bunker in Berlin. They couldn't take this casualties. So here we are. Loaded with mosques, places of religious worship, you say? I say they are centers of sedition and treachery, because they give. I'm just trying to tell you, I do not believe for 1 minute that the worship of Islam is a religious trait. The worship of Islam is that of a geopolitical monster who have told you briefly and to the point that you are going to be victimized by them, and they will see you in New York City shortly. So despite the temperature in my head, I can only say this. I'm an American. I'm not a Republican or a Democrat or any other label. I think our political system needs, as I say, some servicing, where we do not lionize or identify people by whether they are identified with being one party or the other. And the tragedy among those words is that right now, I fear that a large percentage of our people in the United States still believe in the foreign policies that have been engendered by our president and his staff. So, I learned one thing, and I know I'm limited to the few moments by which I live. One, the principles of the founding fathers. Number one, financial independence. Number two, not love of man, but a principle that we all abide by. Altruism, love of country. I love my country. And I hate people who dump warlike butchery on us. But they are the enemy. We have not chosen but to defend ourselves, our ways of life. I must know that I have not only the principle of financial independence, but the principle of education, and above all, the price, the goal of altruism. I love my country. Thank you.
It's a distinct pleasure for me to introduce someone who I was born with. We were separated at birth. We didn't know we were brothers until very recently. And we have collaborated on 2 books, a remarkable man who's been one of the real assets at the London Center, and that is Jed Babin, who will make our final remarks. Jed, the floor is yours.
All right, well, there's a lot we have to be thankful for. In just a couple of years, the London Center has really put a couple of stakes down in history. We've tried very hard, worked very hard. Herb's worked me very hard to make sure that we produce the things that we need to produce. But I'll tell you, and Herb, he may yell at me for this, but I can understand. There are people out there, people are going to say somewhere, somehow, yeah, maybe we don't need the London Center. Well, okay, I thought about this on the train coming up here today. I said, they might have a point. If our Constitution weren't under attack, you might not need the London Center. If ISIS were not Islamic, you probably wouldn't need the London Center. If Obama were not decimating our military and intelligence capabilities, yeah, you probably wouldn't need the London Center. If America were safe from terrorism, yeah, okay, you might not need the London Center. If Russia and China weren't our enemies, yeah, okay, maybe you might need the London Center. If Iran weren't developing nukes, yeah, I guess we wouldn't really need the London Center, would we? If Hillary Rodham Clinton were not running for president, you really wouldn't need us much, would you? If Israel weren't threatened by pretty much everything else in the world, the Arab countries, Iran, terrorism, all of these things, yeah, you probably wouldn't need the London Center. If they weren't threatened by boycotts, heck, I wouldn't have had to write a book this spring, which I still am very proud of. If our economy were thriving, you probably wouldn't need the London Center. And I'll tell you what, if we weren't war-weary, we probably wouldn't need the London Center. But let me just stop right there. I think we are not, as Americans, we are not war-weary, but we are sick and tired of wars that are not fought intending to make them won. And we are pretty sick and tired of certain people in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. But anyway, look, here we stand. Here we are, the London Center, all of us, senior fellows, Herb working so hard, all of the people who are working for him work so hard, and we are going to continue. And I hope you will continue with us because we need your support, we beg for your support, we'll grovel for your support, but we need it because we stand, we speak, we write, we go on television, we do what we need to do to get the message across, and we will not bend. We will not compromise. It is our mission. It is our mission to stand for freedom, and that we do till our dying breaths. And on that happy note, thank you all for coming. We really greatly appreciate your presence. Good night, good luck, see you next year.
One final word, I just wanted to thank the people who made this possible. Ladima Thompson, Brian Griffin, Carol Tabor. Let me thank Gordon Chang, extraordinary friend and senior fellow, and the other senior fellows who are here tonight. Thank you all for coming. I very much appreciate your being here. And thank the honorees, wonderful people.